It's Spoilerin Time, the show where we take all of that information we collect on Cordkillers that tells us how to watch things, watch stuff, and talk about them. This week, we're going to talk about The Larry Sanders Show, episodes 15 and 16 of season 4. I Know This Much Is True, season 1, episode 2, and the movie Big Time Adolescence. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Heck yeah, dude. I don't even know. What a buffet. Where do you want to begin?
Well, first of all, we should remind people that due to the virus, Brian and I aren't recording this show in the same room. Because all the shows that I listen to keep reminding people of that.
Wait, is that a real thing?
Yes.
And they all find it so novel. And meanwhile, it's like we've taken 12 years and gotten to the point where we've bought the right hardware for full duplex communication. So it sounds like we're in the same studio together.
But, I felt left out hearing that on other shows. So I wanted to remind that for 12 years, Brian and I have been doing it.
All right. Are you in your attic? Are you in your closet? Oh, this is crazy.
It's so weird. Let's talk about Big Time Adolescence, which was Bryce's pick for a movie for us to watch this week. And I have to say, I wasn't surprised by this, and I kind of knew early on I wouldn't be surprised by this movie, but I quite enjoyed it. It was good. It was a very typical coming of age story, but it was told without glossy edges. It was told in a way that I felt like, that feels right. Even though I'm 50, that feels right. That feels what being that age was like. And with, things not being exactly great, people not having the best jobs and all of that. I thank you for letting us watch this, Bryce. I liked it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Brian?
Can I look? I'm not 50. I'm only 45. But can I say...
Someday you'll understand.
Can I say that I was massively surprised by this movie on two fronts. The first half of it is very stereotypical, dazed and confused, coming of age. Elements you see are it's cool to drink underage, do drugs underage, break crimes underage,
break laws,
or break crimes, break them down. But what's funny, so that was the first surprise that I got was when I was in my teenage years, and even beforehand, hated every movie like this. Hated every coming of age story that involved underage sex and lack of commitment and goofing around and acting like there would never be consequences. Hated all of those things. Was utterly surprised, being a full-grown adult, to discover like, oh, I see now. This is a fantasy projection on a perfect image of what everybody would like to believe either their adolescence would be or could be or future could be or whatever. And I think that I wrestled at the time with whether or not I was doing it right, whatever it is, living life, right? I think that I never have allowed a movie to not be an indictment of whether or not I was living that phase of my life correctly. But now I'm old enough, not quite 50, Tom. Don't need to feel threatened.
You'll get there.
But now at 45, I ain't got no dog in this fight. This is a fun fantasy projection of, that same stereotypical Porky's narrative that I've seen a billion times before. But that was my first surprise, was that I realized that I was old enough that I could enjoy this type of story without feeling like it was saying or asking anything of me. The part I loved was the second surprise, which is I cannot think of another type of this movie or another instance of this movie that straight up shows the consequences of where that road ends. I was blown away to show like the fact that they showed what a total loser Zeke was, how he was going nowhere, how he would always be full of bluff and bluster, never amount to anything. It was a scathing indictment. Imagine Superbad becomes this just harsh morality reality check. It was, I've sat on it for a day, and I think I love this movie. I think I love it more than any other coming up, because there's also some gut busting, laugh out loud moments in there. I mean, it's good, full stop. And it's good. It's like it does an amazing cover of every dumb adolescent coming of age movie I've seen, and then says, also, by the way, all of you should be ashamed of yourselves, eat crap, and then smash the guitar. I loved it.
Yeah, I think with this, and also Booksmart from a year or maybe 2 years ago now, like I think we're in an interesting new era of teen comedies, teen dramedies, of like the world is different, right? And the high schools don't all look like California, high schools, and like it's not all the same.
They used to, but they don't anymore.
They don't anymore. And so yeah, I think it's really great. Just the decision at the end, almost that kind of where he's driving away, and clearly he has completely got a new understanding and perspective on how kind of dangerous Isaac's lifestyle and Isaac just as a person is, kind of unchecked.
And also, it's not like the world ended for him having dabbled in that fantasy world. It's just he's going to pay a price.
It's left to the viewer to decide what effect that price is going to have on him.
Yeah,
he may not be okay. Right. He may end up going right back into this world thinking like, I won't make the mistakes Zeke made. I'll be able to handle it. Which there's a subtle implication that that's what Zeke thought about the world that he avoided when his friend got in the back of the car, right? Because Zeke is not as in bad a shape as his friend that showed up in the back of the car.
Zeke's friend who wanted a hot box in the car was like the ghost of Christmas Future. It was like, oh my God, this is where this leads.
And Zeke constantly said, like, you're going to be fine. You're 16. And I guess, like, in a universal sense, like, yeah, he's still got all of his fingers and toes and he's alive, but like, he definitely got expelled. He probably has a record now, like a police record. No one cares about your permanent record. And that stuff does follow you, right? Dealing drugs to underage.
How many things have you filled out in your life, job applications or otherwise, that say, have you ever been convicted? And detail here what they are. Yeah. And it's legal for them to ask you that. He's going to have to answer that question.
But also he's very clearly from a privileged family.
Sure.
It'll pretty much go away.
That's what I mean. It leaves questions. Like, could be fine. He might have learned his lesson and get by unscathed, or not. It's not a glossy, everything's, clear finish. And I feel the same about Zeke. I didn't feel like it was a scathing indictment of Zeke. In fact, I thought it was much more real about like, Zeke's not evil. He even tried in his own way to do the right thing to Mo by the end. He just is a bit of an F up. And I would argue that Zeke going back and getting the burger job could be the first step on Zeke getting his life back together. Seeing Mo go through this may shake him up into realizing, okay, you know what? I've got to double down. I've got to figure things out.
It could just be a return to normalcy. I mean, at the start of the movie, Zeke is also working that shift job at the furniture rent-to-own place.
Right. So let me throw two vectors. One is just a quick nod to they don't overplay it, but there's maybe two lines where John Cryer he asks Zeke, like, is this what I have to do to connect with my son? Like not over making it about, I mean, this is clearly a dad who wants to like, I hate you because my son sees you in a better light than he sees me. And that's pretty much the entire beat that they have. And that was powerful, and I liked it. The Zeke, doggone it, I think I lost the second thread.
Well, while we're talking about the father, like the issues that Zeke and Mo are dealing with, those are probably, I would say those are not very new, right? I mean, there's texting now, but coming of age story is still pretty much the same as it used to be 20 years ago. What I feel is very radically different is the way Mo's parents try to parent him, and I think completely drop the ball for the sake of modernity, right? Like, you see a lot of times when Zeke's father is like, or not, sorry, Mo's father is like, we're going to nip this in the bud, consequences now. And then at the first sign of resistance, he's like, you do whatever you want. And it's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Wait.
I love that though, because it's a more realistic, you know, parental failing than what you used to get in these kind of movies, which is like the uptight father who just yells and screams, and the crying mother who doesn't understand. Like these felt like real characters to me.
I remembered my second thread, which was one thing that this movie did that I don't think I've seen from any other coming of age story, is give a credible pitch as to, like, first of all, immediately opens with there's going to be consequences, and he says, I know what this looks like, let me explain, and then offers a very seductive pitch as to why somebody would start a bromance with Zeke, and somebody who felt isolated from his class would want to hang out with older kids who were starting the next phase of their life. I thought that was, I don't know, I liked it a lot. Like
absolutely agree with that, because one of the things that rang true to me, even at my advanced age, was
what age is that, by the way? How old are you?
I don't even remember.
Oh no!
Is I had a friend when I was 17 that worked at the Uptown Motel. He was about 5 years older than me. And I would come and hang out with him and sit on the steps of the Uptown Motel, drinking beers, which I was not legally allowed to do. And it was cool. It was great because he was a role model close enough to my age that I felt like he understood, but had been down the road, and you know, I could get a few pointers from him. Thankfully, he wasn't like Zeke, and he didn't lead me down a road to perdition. But that part of the Mo Zeke relationship really rang true for me, because I'm like, yeah, when you're that age, somebody that gives you the time of day and doesn't talk down to you like that, that's valuable. That's real.
And you think if you're someone underage who wants to do good, I mean, you see Mo a lot of times wrestle with, well, I would like to be doing good, but he gets talked into it. You kind of grow up with safety railings around everything, and you assume, well, if this was really bad, someone would stop me. And it's not until the end of the movie where, like, the people that Zeke live with, like, really reckoned with the fact that this kid is actually 16, and even still they don't do anything. Like, you assume that there will be people watching, and that's a huge lesson that Mo learns, is that no one's watching. You are making your decisions, and it's a different kind of coming of age, of reconciling consequences of your actions.
And I think part of what makes this work is that they didn't need to be that good. Like that whole the movie creators, like the movie's not good because you discover it's a morality play at the end. The movie's good because it's good, and the funny parts are funny, and the outrageous parts are fun. Like, it's all great, and it's only in the last 20% that you're like, I've never seen this before in this type of movie, and that's when I really fell for it.
Yeah, you know, before I saw this, because I watched it for the first time for the Spoilerin Time, I kind of assumed that the Mo and Zeke dynamic would be the real unicorn here, right? Like, we don't see a lot of dynamics like that so prominent in a coming of age teenager movie, and yet it's obviously a primary element, but it's not like, isn't it so weird? Like, it's not. It's very normal.
And of course, it's not weird. And to Tom's point, being in the magic community, when I got to college, 18, 19 years old, you meet other working magicians who are older than you. And there was this moment that I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm actually friends with somebody who's 40. That's crazy.
But
so it's like I totally identified with the novelty of like, and he's much more interesting. I just want to hear all of his stories.
All right. Anything else on Big Time Adolescence?
Do you think it deserves only a 7 out of 10 on IMDb? Like, is there something
I prefer to just look at Rotten Tomatoes.
I will say, I do think it's weird that for as modern as this movie is, that the mother really is a background player pretty much the entire time. She really has.
She's way farther back in the background than the dad. You're right.
Maybe it's because there's a father figure element to Zeke.
Right, exactly. I think that's the excuse is we needed to keep it to 93 minutes. And
it's certified fresh, 85% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any competitors, it's the dad. So I don't know. I forgive that.
Yeah.
And it's got an 83% audience score too. So.
Oh, nice. Big recommend for if you like this, go check out Booksmart. A very similar sort of high school coming of age story, but from a with feminine perspectives.
Yeah, I don't.
Did you see Booksmart?
I did. I saw it in the theaters. Booksmart just felt like we're doing the same thing, only the novelty is it's with girls. But like, man, the punch at the end of this movie where it's like, no, here's what the end of that road looks like, was just like so surprising and so remarkable to me.
Yeah.
Let's talk about I Know This Much Is True, episode 2 of season 1, although I really think there really is probably only one season here. And we get a lot more flashback this time.
Yeah.
Brian,
we
were
get
you able to finish
watching?
Yeah.
Last week I was talking about how it was just too much. I couldn't handle it. I only got maybe 20 minutes into the first episode, and I was just not prepared for the level of reality that they were presenting. But I did go back and watch all of it, and was a little bit surprised that episode 2, they decided to throw in a little sudden infant death syndrome while we're at it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, because I think they're, and I get the idea that every tragedy possible is going to play a part in the story. But I think they were trying to explain, like, this is why these two, which in episode 1, you see, they still like each other. They don't hate each other. But this is why they're not together. And this is underlying the pain that Thomas is going through, Thomas is Dominic is going through. So yeah, and we also have the tragedy of his origins, which in episode 1, I didn't bring it up last week because you hadn't watched it all the way through, but felt very clear to me that Grandpa was dad, and that's why it was hidden.
Oh,
I did not pick that up.
I didn't catch that either. That's fascinating. I mean, we do certainly spend a lot of time talking about the manuscript and what an awful guy he is.
Let's we'll put a pin in that. What's up with Juliette Lewis just showing up kookaburra at his house? In
the first episode?
Yeah, that might have been the first episode because
she's the translator who shows up at his house in the first episode because she sort of is wink flirty when he drops off the manuscript. But yeah, she is a character who obviously is lonely and feels like, this guy's lonely too. I guess we could go be lonely together. Let me try something out.
But then also like waving the manuscript saying, I read these words. They're so awful you don't ever even want to know what they said. Who wants to get me drunk? It's me, Juliette Lewis.
Yeah, I don't know. That was a scene born out of weird circumstances, but its own sort of tragedy.
Well, I guess I don't know. We'll see where that goes, but but I don't know. Crazy is catching, and Juliette Lewis is there to portray someone who is troubled.
Yeah, I get, and again, everyone is going to be troubled. I don't think we're going to have a character in this particular story that is not have some sort of, strong trauma, flaw, impediment, and that's the kind of story that we're experiencing here. I thought the scene where Dr. Patel plays the recording of her session with Thomas, and Thomas talking about stuff that Dominic was like, that never happened. And Dr. Patel sort of backpedaling and like, oh, it probably was a bad idea for me to play that for you. I didn't expect you to have that reaction. There's more going on here than I thought. Again, points to that secrets in the attic sort of situation.
She says some version of, I guess there's 2 patients I have.
Yeah, right.
Right. All of a sudden, that was the moment that I was like, oh, this is the real story, whatever the real story is.
And I think the story is going to be that Thomas has the obvious problems, but Dominic has the worse ones.
Yeah, this episode especially puts a lot more weight into something he mentions in the first episode when describing his Dom's mother as having this curse, this family curse, right? I expect that will be Dom's reckoning, is seeing all of these awful things and putting them all in we have a family curse bucket, and now I also am wet in the curse. I am also befallen by tragedy all around. What are we ever going to do with this bloodline?
I will say number one, it's a tour de force of acting from Mark Ruffalo.
Hell yeah.
Not only playing 2 different characters, which I'd be really curious to know about the weight gain and loss and which order he, I'm sure
they shot the whole thing in phase. So him skinny and then him fat.
In phase, you in different phases, or
no, one in
really?
They had a stand-in.
Digital? Oh.
They had a stand-in while they were doing him as thin, and then they came back and did the scenes of his fat.
Wild.
Bigger.
But mainly it's a tour de force that Mark Ruffalo is playing the world's greatest magician, misdirecting our attention every time he casually asks about his father, and his ma says, I don't want to talk about it, and he's like, anyway, we won't talk about it. 2 episodes in, I'm like, I don't know how many more times you could pull that trick on us.
Well, that's maybe why it's only 6 episodes long. We're 2/3 of the way through, or we're 1/3 of the way through. So, yeah. Any other thoughts on I Know This Much Is True episode 2?
It's very good. I'm glad that upon my second attempt to start it, I knew what I was in for.
I was mentioning this right before we started recording. The first episode I had to watch twice to really I don't know, follow and really cement what was going on in my mind, and I didn't do that for the second episode, and I feel like I needed to. I feel like going into today's all of our recordings today, I felt like, oh man, I really should have just watched it again, because it's dense and it's got a lot of emotional data going on that and it's hard to hold on to.
In a very subtle way, constantly. It's not one you can watch distracted. I mean, this is a full attention view, or don't even bother.
Right. So.
All right. Let's talk about Larry Sanders' show. 0.409 and 8. 2 number related titles.
I was so confused by the titles. I didn't know if there was a problem.
Well, and 409 doesn't even
relate to
anything in the show, I don't think.
I'm not sure. What are we missing? We're missing something with 0.409.
There must be a joke or something we're missing.
It's got to be the ratio
there was a reference
of her
that I
age to
didn't
his.
catch.
Oh, here we go. Yes, the episode title refers to the ratio between Nina and Larry's ages.
Oh, called it!
18 divided by 4 is approximately 0.409. You should have said that in the show, Mary.
So I'm starting to come up with my own personal taxonomy of Larry Sanders Show, and this is the Hollywood actor trope dealt with by Larry is roughly the category, which is, the actor that dates a significantly younger person and trades on their fame and then gets bored with it because that person doesn't really have the experience to, satisfy more than the basest urges. And it was fine. It was a fine episode. I didn't have a problem with it, but I was never shocked or surprised at any point. What about y'all?
I don't know. I thought it was interesting. Yeah. Now maybe this is a younger man's story, Tom.
That could be. It could be the generation gap.
I know that your ratio would be different than mine.
Be much different. Yeah.
But before and maybe that's why they were coy on the title was because my experience was, wow, that is an attractive girl. I'm looking at her, and then I see flirtation, and I'm like, well, I can't blame him. And then I start doing the math. I'm like, how old is Larry? And then they say out loud, how old is Larry? And then they name a wide range of numbers so that any male of roughly my age can project themselves into Larry's position and question whether or not what he's doing is a good idea or a bad idea. And then the next question I had was like, what would be there in an 18-year-old for me? And then Larry finds out the answer is nothing. Liability, it turns out, is what is there for an 18-year-old. And then
that really is the part of this episode that kind of has I'm not going to say aged poorly, but if it were to take place in 2020, it would be more
almost
that
criminal.
Well, it would be that a boss is sleeping with an employee.
The power differential.
Power dynamic,
right? Yeah.
And they very only briefly mention it when she's in bed, where she's like, but I came onto you. I want it. And it's like, maybe that's meant to hand wave it away, but like no one else is even thinking in that way at all.
I think that's the headspace I was in. I was fascinated. That there was ever a time this was normal, and that I could possibly believe that Larry Sanders, who I find as our charming protagonist, would think that this was remotely. He very clearly immediately says, this was not a good idea, or whatever hand waving thing there is. But I was just like, oh my God, this is really what's happening. And as a result, I found this episode very fascinating.
Huh. Okay. For the same reasons, I found it a little bit paper thin, but that's interesting. Oh. What about 8, which felt more like a gimmick episode, but I enjoyed the gimmick of like, let's do a fake anniversary special, and like an anniversary special, we'll have a bunch of special guests, and you'll never quite know what's gonna happen next. And I thought this was just. It wasn't deep, like it wasn't nearly as deep as the previous episode, but it was a lot of fun.
Tom, can I confess something?
What?
I liked it because it was the episode he had to pee.
That was a great shtick. Yeah.
No, you don't understand, Tom.
Brian's relationship to being on camera and having to use the bathroom.
So like, this was in your taxonomy. This would be a real life story put in the Larry Sanders. Yeah. Okay. Yes. All right. I got you.
It's like the number.
If
of
Larry
times...
took his shoes off, Brian would have flown. He would have floated into the studio today. He would have reached a nirvana that has never been seen before.
I mean, you don't understand. Like, it's gotten to the point where I know Bryce has heard this 100 times, but I say out loud to Bryce, it's a psychological thing. I just have to know that I don't have to go. And so I go.
And I don't care. But stop telling me about your penis.
I know you don't care. But it's like, oh my God, the show's never been closer to my real life than this episode.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that so much.
I mean, you see me. I get up and leave every break. I go and I make sure just 100%, and that's a holdover from my stage performing days. The peace of mind. I can't. And to see him trapped over something so innocent and so dumb, and the whole world is grabbing him. Oh, it's so good.
Well, and it's ridiculous how impossible it is for him to go pee.
Yes.
Right? Like, it's unbelievable that would actually happen the way it happened. But what about, and I don't want to talk too much about, I know this is much is true in the Larry Sanders Show thing, so I won't spoil too much, but we had Rosie O'Donnell in both episodes, and man.
Oh, she was great.
Great in both. Yeah.
Yeah. No. She was having her own daytime talk show in Larry Sanders. So it was cute to see her ramping up into that awesome role. She is at the top of her game as a real actor in I Know This Much Is True. Like it was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely I don't know, I'm not going to say a shock, but when they're like, yeah, Rosie, you just got back from touring, I was like, oh yeah, I bet Rosie O'Donnell is a stand-up comedian as well.
Yeah, she's filling that stand-up comedian space in Larry Sanders.
Like kind of like Roseanne did a little bit, or early Roseanne TV show.
Roseanne was the stand-up comedian who had made it big, right? Rosie was still just the stand-up comedian who's pretty successful as a stand-up comedian, but hasn't made it big.
I loved the gag of the two actors from the hospital shows in backstage.
Oh my God!
Arguing about their show,
their wieners,
while doing the sketch that they don't want to do, but they're doing it backstage.
Noah Wiley and Mandy Patinkin, right? Like, that was great. I love that. Also, it was nice to see. I never watched Chicago Hope. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
And so I never really got used to Mandy Patinkin between Princess Bride and Homeland. Right?
And he's in that perfect you wouldn't remember it, but that 45-year-old middle ground between being, because now he's fully embraced being an old man. And it's great. If you look at his Twitter feed, it's hilarious. He's great.
That's who I identify with more. Mandy Patinkin.
Yeah, exactly. But you can still see it's like, oh, that's just a softer version of the left-handed Spaniard, isn't it?
Yeah. That was great. Then Farrah Fawcett cameo
out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been huge in 1995 when I was watching this. I've been like, oh my gosh, that's Farrah Fawcett. What is she doing these days? Like,
it made me sad, to be honest.
A little bit.
It was one of those moments. Man, there's so many great people on that show, and so many of them have left us. And
she did not live that many years after that appearance.
No, she didn't.
Yeah. Katie Lang, they've had a good run of really good musical guests of the era, but really quality guests that I still enjoy.
Setting up a Katie Lang, Hank Kingsley rivalry, a feud.
Over a neighbor disput. That was the best part.
Yeah, over acorns in his pool. No, I loved it. I thought it was a great episode.
It was like a variety show. I enjoyed it. Any other thoughts on the Larry Sanders Show?
No, but I will say these two, and it sounds like I liked the first of the two more than you did, but for different reasons. These are two of my favorites that I've seen in a while.
All right, folks, that's the Larry Sanders Show, episodes 15 and 16 of season 4. And that's it for Spoilerin Time. Next week, we will talk about Larry Sanders Show 417 and 501, I believe. I think we're going to be bridging the two seasons. We'll talk about I Know This Much Is True 103, and we will have something else to watch. So keep an eye out on the blog, on the Patreon, or just listen in After Talk about that decision. Thanks for supporting us. Patreon.com/Cordkillers. We'll spoil you again next time.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.